If your son or daughter were raising around, what would you tell them to watch out for that most CEO founders miss? I'm super excited. Today, I've got Brett Hurt with me, someone who is a dear friend, somebody that we're going to tell some stories about our past. But like I said, I'm fortunate to call Brett a close friend that I've collaborated with for over 15 years. He's a serial entrepreneur who has built and scaled multiple companies from idea to exit, including Core Metrics, acquired by IBM, and Bizarre Voice, which he took public in one of the most successful SaaS IPOs of its era. Most recently, Brett co-founded data.world, a certified public benefit corporation, which was just acquired by ServiceNow. Brett brings the perspective of a founder, a CEO, investor, and mentor with over 100 investments through Hurt Family Investments. So he has sat on every side of the table. What I love about having Brett here is that this isn't just about his story. It's about the lessons and patterns he's seen work time and again, the ones that can help any leader scale with purpose and clarity. So thank you, Brett, for coming on and doing this with me. You and I have had so many conversations. This is really just feels like two friends talking here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I love you, brother. And, one thing you left out is, I wrote this book, The Entrepreneur's Essentials, which
Yes.
in part was inspired by your book, Predictive Leadership. And if people buy this, all the proceeds go to benefiting female entrepreneurs. But if they don't want to buy it, they can read it for free online at theentrepreneursessentials.com, and they can chat with it and listen to AI podcast hosts discuss each chapter. And so, that's really codifies the essential knowledge that I wanted to share with entrepreneurs I've learned both through my startups as well as through the many companies we've invested in and seen time and time again what actually works.
Yeah. Well, I know there's a lot more that I also missed in your bio, and that was one of the things I was going to bring up. But while we're on that point, really would encourage people to buy it for the reasons that you just indicated. But a lot of what I've talked about for this podcast is this just is a season where I'm just leaving it kind of all on the field, if you will. And I think that's what your book does. These are lessons that, I don't think you felt like you needed to write a book to kind of put an exclamation point on your career by any stretch of imagination. I think knowing
Definitely not.
you poured yourself and did literally every word and story and example into that book to really help others. And that's what I've come to know to be very true about you. Mitchell Green, who's part of this podcast, who's one of the co-founders of Lead Edge Capital. Um, he talked about how, there wouldn't be a Lead Edge Capital if it wasn't for Brett Hurt, and how you really helped him and believed in him and early on. And I've just seen you do that consistently. And I think it's one of the things that people that know you understand, that the people that maybe don't understand you, what really motivates you is I think it is really helping others and pushing that love
Sure.
out into the world. And so that book is, I think, really encapsulates who you are as a person, not just the lessons that you've learned. So
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. I love Mitchell and am very happy for him with all of his success. Like you, we're investors in all of their VC funds, and they've done really well. And I have to say that I definitely would not be who I am on that front without the example of my father always giving to others, and my mom putting all that love in my heart. So it is truly who I am because of the way I was raised, and I really thank and honor them for that. And unfortunately, they passed away, as you know, 13
yes.
and 17 years ago. But they were absolutely extraordinary parents, and I have many conversations with them today, in prayer and in other means.
Yeah. Well, and not everyone is as fortunate to have parents that shaped and poured into you that way. And I think a lot of the difference that you're putting and making into the world is giving people that opportunity to experience that kind of that love, that care, that genuineness. And I've gotten to watch it, firsthand. I've gotten to be kind of by your side for 15 years, and I watched like what motivates you, what is it, the things that drive you. And so anyways, it's something that I really appreciate, and I've learned a lot
Well,
personally.
thank you. You've been a big part of my success. and radiating that love inside of companies and the best places to work awards and all of that. So I
Yeah.
thank you for believing
Yeah.
in me and being on the journey with me.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, let's jump in here. So I've got some questions I want to go through, and let's just see where the this journey kind of takes us on this conversation.
Great.
Uh, as I said in your intro, you really sat on every side of the table as a founder, CEO, investor, mentor. Um, you've seen what the right capital at the right time can do, and you've probably also seen the damage that the wrong money can cause. From all those reps and all those experiences, as an investor, CEO, founder, what's your number one rule for founders thinking about raising money?
Well, this is actually, I'm going to reference a book a lot. This is in chapter 12 of my book, which is all about how to check references for your investors. I remember back when I was starting Coremetrics, Arthur Patterson, who was already a billionaire and the co-founder of Excel Partners back then, he's been a VC since 1972. Um, really took a liking to Coremetrics, my first VC-backed company. I bootstrapped my first three companies, and that was my fourth and the first VC back. And I checked his references, and he thought it was interesting when I asked for references. And then I also went, off balance sheet a bit and found ways to reference him. And I get this reaction from people like, you realize that you're checking the reference of a billionaire in Silicon Valley who already has a track record completely unparalleled to you. This is when I was 26 years old. And I would say, yeah, look, I want to get it right. And, if nothing else, even if you're a super positive reference, like at least you can tell me what you would do over in terms of the way that you would initially start working with him. And one of the things that they told me is they said, hey, don't ever surprise him. Just be totally transparent, the good, the bad, the ugly, and you'll get the best out of him in terms of mentoring. And that was part of the wisdom that got me to be a very transparent and frequent communicator to our board of directors and to investors, which is something that Mitchell always compliments me on. And that's chapter 13 in my book, how to communicate with your investors and advisors. So I would say that the things that I've messed up the most when it comes to raising money, and every chapter in my book, just to be clear, also, there's a parallel to it. There's a flip side to it that although I'm saying what I would do, I've not done that sometimes. And
Uh,
so every chapter also is mirrored by failures. And so, when I haven't done that process of checking the references, that is where I've gotten hurt the most. And and then, in situations where I've checked the references and there's like a little bit of, let's say some hair on the reference, that's a
uh,
VC term, they talk about hair on the deal.
uh,
And I've kind of looked the other way. I've usually really regretted that. Not always, but usually. So, remember that when you're raising capital, it is truly like a marriage, and chemistry really matters, and alignment really matters. And one of the things that you should probe on when you check the references for a VC or board member or executive for that matter is you should really probe on how they behave when the going gets tough. It's always easy for people to pat you on the back and call you a genius and all these things that you shouldn't really take to heart when things are going great. But if you hit a rough patch, you really find out who your true friends are. And that's true in life, that's true in business, that's true in a marriage. So, you have to know like how they'll behave under duress. And if they'll be like cool hand Luke, or if they're going to be, like a total drama king or queen. So
yeah,
that's the biggest lesson I've learned on that front. Of course, there's all the obvious things like, do they understand your industry? Are they actually going to be that helpful? Like, how well do they leverage their network? How much do they actually care? How many board of directors are they on? And how are they
yeah.
managing that load? Those are all obvious things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they're maybe obvious, but maybe not obvious. But I really appreciate you sharing that. And the people that are listening are going to hear kind of a almost an echo because these are the exact same that Julie Maples said, that
Oh,
Kirk
that's
Dando
fun.
said, Mitchell,
She
and
she is she's really believed in me since I was 26 years old. I'm 53 now.
yeah, yeah. Well, and they talked about it is like a marriage, and so I really appreciate you kind of talking about that, checking references, and not just checking them, but what were you looking for, and this idea about really talking to references maybe that things didn't go well, that that
Yeah.
maybe unfortunately it went to zero, or it didn't provide the return stuff. How what
Yeah, I'll
did
give you an example. I mean, so data.world, as you noted, was acquired by ServiceNow on July 7th. Well, our Series A was led by Jason Pressman of Shasta Capital, and I really probed on references, even though I had known Jason since since I was 26 years old. Okay, I'd known him because he was a customer of ours during the Core Metrics days when he was the head of operations for all of Walmart.com. And but I really wanted to get it right. And I checked lots of references, and a lot of the references told me that he was the only sane person in the room when everything was melting down. And
uh
we hit numerous rough patches with data.world, and Jason Pressman was really, really helpful in those and became the most important voice on our board in many of the board meetings from the investor side. And, that doesn't mean that he always told me what I would like to hear.
yeah.
He was a sage advice and very balanced in all the times. And I would certainly work with him again and consider him a very good friend. And I've seen his heart too with his family and with his son, with his wife. And, he's a really, really good person. But what makes him so special is that he's both that and experientially, he's been through it all, both
Yeah.
on the operator side, the scale up side, as well as on the VC side now for a very long time.
Well, and I remember many conversations we've had, and it sounds like he took the time to kind of build the rapport and the relationship so it could handle the weight of the truth. So in those difficult times, he was able to say maybe it isn't exactly what you wanted to hear, but he had done enough to earn that trust and that respect with you. So that's
Sure.
again, not everybody wants to do that. Like I said, if somebody's sitting on 15, 20 different boards and stuff like that, sometimes they don't have time to invest in that. So you
Yeah.
talked about when you guys hit a rough patch. Have you ever been involved with a company or led a company where there wasn't a rough patch?
No. There's always times where there's rough patches. I mean, you
Yeah,
know that from
yeah,
from your own book and experience,
uh,
with your book Predictive
yeah,
Leadership. But there is no such thing as up and to the right with no rough patches. I mean, look at the one of the most famous examples now, and I just mentioned this because we're in this AI age. OpenAI has been live with ChatGPT for 2 years and 8 months as of this recording. They are
yeah,
now at a 12 million ARR run rate. Okay, so that's a little bit over 2.5 years to be at 12 million ARR. The fastest company before that was Salesforce, which took 18 years to get to 10 billion of ARR. Hopefully, I said 12 billion. Yeah,
yeah. 12. Yeah, you said you
yeah.
said you said you said million.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, OpenAI 12 billion. It took Salesforce 18 years to get there. It took ServiceNow, who just acquired data.world, as the third kind of slowest
Uh, uh,
to get there, 21 years. And look at the drama they had when they kicked Sam Altman out as the
yeah,
CEO, and like it was just total meltdown time. And Satya Nadella was going to end up literally holding the bag for everything. So I mean, yeah, there's just no such thing as not having a rough patch. And you should not be an entrepreneur if you expect it to all go smoothly. And frankly, most people are absolutely terrified of being an entrepreneur. I always tell those people it's much harder to have a baby and raise children. And almost everybody does that. But chapter 2 of my book is on the paralyzing fear of getting started. And that paralyzing fear can set in many, many times in a startup journey. One of the things that I've seen, and I know you've seen this, when CEOs stop communicating that we've invested in, um, almost every time. it is because they're curled up in a ball and shivering and freaking out.
Yeah.
And that is the time where they should be communicating actually the most, at least to their board of directors, to really get help. And it's, there's a lot of reasons why they're curled up in a ball. It's like shame, it's fear, it's embarrassment. I mean, there's just so many reasons, but those are times where, you really need help and you really need people that you can trust for help. And, you know,
Yeah.
a good way to check if you're working with the right people on your board or executive team is whether or not you feel comfortable communicating with them
Yeah.
during those times. I mean, that's true in a marriage or in a best friendship or anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you talk about kind of this issue around, there's a lot of fear in starting, but I work with CEOs. In fact, one of the questions I asked Mitchell at the end of our conversation, I said, tell me something about yourself that maybe investors or people don't know about you. And he goes, I'm not all that confident. He goes, I live a lot in fear of failure. I'm paranoid about failing. And I think that's something that, used for good, it can kind of keep you sharp. It keeps that balance between humility and hubris. It can,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
going back to what we just said, kind of checking references. I've never been involved in a company. Doesn't sound like you are. At least there's two people on the face of the planet where there's not been problems when the company grew. So by definition, if you're checking references, those people should have worked with companies where there were problems, and talk to those CEOs, talk to those executives. How did they get treated in those moments? You know,
Yep.
what is the expectation? This thread of keep communicating, like um, communicate the good news, obviously, but the bad news, get it out there faster. But you can't just do it when there's bad. You got to build those relationships. So I'm gonna have you talk a little bit about one of the things that I know you're exceptional at. It's just not communication and the weekly communication to your investors. And I believe one of the reasons you do that is because you're working with other people's money, and that you feel like they deserve to know what's happening, and be transparent about the good, the bad, and everything else that's kind of going on. But you also have worked, I know you talk about this in the book as well, about an advisor network, not just so you can say, hey, so and so is part of our advisor network, but you really treat them as a team of people that comes around you and that you lean on to help grow the business. So I'll stop there and let you kind of talk a little bit of just about how your communication style and how you think about advisors, board members, investors.
Yeah, I've been doing that for a long time in terms of hiring lots of advisors, and equity compensating them because I just felt like it's natural to say, well, I want the experts around the table. Like, when you're going into the retail market, I had Richard Marcus, the former CEO of Neiman Marcus, may he rest in peace, on my advisory board, and he was super, super helpful. I've had deep AI experts on our advisory board at data.world. I've had, deep go-to-market experts on our advisory board. Every combination you can imagine, and really creating a very big tent. And the way I look at it metaphorically is that, think about a battle. You're sitting around the campfire and you're going to the biggest battle in your life. Let's pretend like we're back in medieval days or
Medieval. Yeah.
Spartans, whatever. And, I want to be able to look back and say, hey, Kirk, do you have a battle axe?
Yeah.
And you say, yeah, Brett, I've got a battle axe, and you throw it to me. You're not the one ultimately in the arena, right? You're helping lots of companies. Um, and it really is hard when you're grinding through a startup. There's some really, really tough times. OpenAI is having all this amazing, amazing success right now, but they're probably working 7 days a week and nearly nonstop. Greg Brockman, who is their CEO, had to take a sabbatical for 6 months so that he didn't just totally burn himself out. He's back now. So, there's a lot of grind when it comes to starting a company, and you want lots of friends in your corner, and then you want to be able to communicate with them often. Sometimes you'll pull them into meetings. One thing I've seen and learned is that the wrong way to have an advisory board, I've been on some, is
Uh,
to have all the advisors together in one big powwow meeting. That's a total waste of time. The reality is there's certain advisors that are useful for certain things. Like back in the Bazaar Voice days, I had, 70 plus advisors. I had 70 plus advisors at data.world too. But for the strategic advisory board meetings where we're really discussing the future of the company and the strategy, I pulled in Julie Maples, Josh
Mhm.
Koppelman, the founder of
Yes.
the co-founder of First Round Capital back
Yes.
then, was just getting started out. I pulled him in. I pulled in Mike Maples Jr., who was just getting started with Floodgate. I
Uh-huh.
pulled in, Jamie Krauthamel, who's the founder of Performix. I pulled in all these legendary people to discuss strategy. And those meetings were super, super, super helpful.
Uh-huh.
And would have been a disaster if I had 70 people in the room. I just had like
Yeah.
4 or 5. They would also not care to be in the room if we were just talking with 5 like super guru programming
Uh-huh.
type on AI development. I mean, they might find it intellectually fascinating, but they would not understand, 90% of what those people are talking about. And that's
Yeah.
not because they're not intelligent. Those are some of the most intelligent people I know. It's because these programmers are live and breathe code. I've been programming since I was 7, and I literally used to dream in code. No kidding. Um,
That's
and
awesome.
that's what it feels like when you code all the time.
Uh-huh.
So it's just different modalities. But you should communicate to all of them on the same exact cadence and with the same level of transparency that you communicate to your investors. Your board of directors gets a different level of transparency. I mean, obviously, you're
Uh-huh.
talking about
Yeah.
stock options and
Yeah.
people you might fire and all people you
The
might promote.
cat yeah,
Right.
yeah, the categories are different for sure.
The categories are a bit different, but in general, I try to be almost as transparent, if not as transparent in most things with everybody in that tent, just because it gets you the most amount of help for the occasional battle axe you may need. I know battle is kind of a bad metaphor because I really lead with love, not
Yeah,
with
yeah.
not with a warmonger type of attitude.
Yeah.
But sometimes
But
it does
sometimes
feel
it
like
feels like
war.
that. I mean,
Oh
that is,
yeah,
I mean,
sometimes it feels like war. You can't be on the battlefield of entrepreneurship and not sometimes be in a warlike mode, with competition and stuff like
well,
that.
and that's the time that you don't want to be sitting around the fire, to use your metaphor, by yourself, and
Yes, yeah,
that's not the time to start building that. It's along the way. Like you said, it starts with those references. It starts thinking about those advisors and think, you know, um, most businesses I see that stall out or fail or don't hit their full potential, it's not because the market wasn't big enough, the strategy wasn't strong enough. It's because they really haven't led in a way that allowed for that communication and that building those relationships and that rapport. Because we
yep.
just said earlier, neither one of us have been part of seen a company that didn't hit a hard time. So it's going to happen.
Hmm.
So it's just as much a part of growing a business as it is, oxygen to living.
Yeah.
So you gotta
Yeah,
have
it's yeah,
that.
it's in everything. I mean, you shouldn't have children if you don't
Yeah,
expect to have some really tough moments. You shouldn't get married unless you
yeah,
expect to have some really tough moments. It's business is a lot like that. It's all romance and love and dreams at the beginning, and then you hit the hardcore reality of go-to-market fit and product development and whether or not you have the humility to actually listen to your customers and whether or not you can eject people off the bus that really are bad apples for
yeah.
whatever you're doing. Not that they're bad people
People,
necessarily,
yeah,
but
they're
just
not
not a
part.
fit.
Yep. Yeah, and that's probably one of the most difficult things as a leader is to align, what you're trying to do and get that fit with people. And we could spend a whole episode just talking about
Oh
that.
yeah.
What
You've seen a lot
Yeah,
on that front.
yeah, yeah. That's where I end up spending most of my time, is around just kind of helping, giving confidence to the leaders and the entrepreneurs and CEOs that they do have something and they need to
Yep.
protect that. But if what they're constantly trying to do is, and in fact, I just was talking to a CEO before we got on here about this very issue, is if we're constantly just trying to make it where everybody's happy and excited, we actually compromise what the business, and I'm not talking about the balance sheet and profit loss. I'm talking about the business as if it's a person that
Yep.
has a journey that it's on, but it can't advocate for itself. It can't walk, it can't talk, it can't give itself values. It depends upon the CEOs and leaders to do that. And if we get that confused, then that confusion finds its way into the business. We end up spending a lot of time spending on that. But
Yeah. Yeah. You know that I believe that And I'm talking about a different type of soul, but I do believe a company has a soul and
Yes.
soul needs to be nourished. And you can actually, it's harder to tell now than it was like before, when everybody was working in person, you could just walk the halls of an office and you could literally feel it in your own soul, whether or not that company had a strong soul,
Yep. Mhm.
or whether or not it was just just ripping energy out of you
Yeah.
in an extractive way. And I've visited, in my life, I've visited, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 24, but I visited many, many, many companies where you could feel like the gravity of working there and the fear and just the mindset. And then I visited some companies where it just felt absolutely amazing. I'll never forget when I visited, Custom Ink, Mark Katz's company.
Uh,
Steve Katz has always been one of my favorite investors and advisors and really believed in me since my Wharton days. But Mark's company, man, at that point in time, it was rated the number one retailer to work for in the entire United States, above like, LL Bean and everybody
uh,
else. And you could feel it. It just felt like the energy was palpable.
yeah.
And that just, you could just tell the soul was vibrant and embodied.
Yeah. 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 And it's kind of like a tone in a home, right? You can walk into
Hmm.
somebody's home and kind of sense it. Same thing
Very
with,
good point. Very good point. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
that's really good. So, when you were running Bizarre Voice and later data.world, prior to that, core metrics, and like I said, all the business, how did you decide when it was the right time to raise? And
Mhm.
just as important, when it wasn't the right time to raise, how did you think about that?
Well, in terms of raising the ideal fundraise for sure, the nirvana state for a company raising capital is when they truly do not need the capital except to grow faster. Like
Mhm.
that's the state that Bizarre Voice hit
Yeah.
within its first year of existence. And because of that, we went from, 0 to 100 million of AR in 6 years, and we only raised 23 million and had 13 million left in the bank when we went public, right? So, Y Combinator so is one of the top three most cash flow efficient SaaS companies of all time. That's the nirvana state. That's super duper rare. The majority of the time, it's you're raising capital because you can predict that you're going to run out of money.
Yeah.
And for me, I always raised capital at data.world at least a year before we'd run out of money.
Mhm.
And that was super important, and that saved our bacon in many situations, including the meteor that hit our business that we couldn't have predicted, which was the pandemic, the
Mhm.
COVID-19 pandemic, which I really was in a very fearful state for a while that that may be the blow that knocks us out of business
Mhm.
and bankrupts the company. But then I got Prologis Ventures, one of our customers, Prologis, huge company, to invest, and that created the cascade of wow, even customers are investing, and then we were able to raise enough money to survive and thrive, and eventually have this exit to ServiceNow. So that's that's most people say wait until you have 6 months left in the bank. That's way too stressful for me and not ideal. Um, but that is more the norm. And I've even gotten that advice on, the board of both, data.world as well as other companies that, hey, don't worry about it until you have 6 months of capital in the bank. But you know, the problem with that is that if you really get down to the wire, then you get very desperate on terms. And I was able to have data.world throughout its entire history raise at a 1x non-participating preferred pari passu to all prior rounds so that everybody was rowing in the same boat.
Um,
And a lot of these headlines that you've seen over the past 3 years in the post ZIRP era, ZIRP stands for zero interest rate period, where SaaS valuations hit an all-time high from a multiple perspective, the multiple of the amount of revenue they had to the amount they're raising at. Like some companies were at 10 million of AR and they're raising at $1 billion.
yeah. Yeah.
of valuation. Most of those companies now deeply regret that because they never grew out of that hole. Those companies, when they got that billion-dollar valuation, a lot of times they were taking it at a 3, 4, 5x participating preferred, which means that all that capital that they're raising, 100 million, 200 million, if they're raising at 5x participating preferred, it means that they need to clear $1 billion on the pref stack. If they raise 200 million,
Yeah.
it's 5x of that, just to even get any money back to common. So that's a really, really, really hard scenario. And nobody talks about that in these headlines. They're
Yep.
all,
This is what you're anticipating my next question. So
yeah,
let's kind of keep going on this a little bit because I've
yeah,
asked
go ahead.
everybody,
Yeah,
I've asked Mitch and all of them about that. Is like, how do you balance that, the valuation, the big number, and everything else like that versus dilution versus not creating so much overhang for the business, not
yeah,
because you see, like I said, it's like everybody congratulates. It's like, wow, $1 billion valuation,
yeah,
wow,
yeah,
200
yeah,
million. It's
yeah.
kind of like saying, wow, you just put a huge mortgage on your house in a neighborhood that it's never going to be worth that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing is, I'll recommend a book that is really amazing that I just finished. I've been reading tons of books on spirituality, which really help a lot with leadership. And this
Yes.
book is called, it's by Anthony DeMello, and it's called Awareness. And actually, Taro, the founder of Four Sigmatic, which is my favorite, mushroom blend, you've had those in my smoothies.
Yes. Yes.
It's a book that he recommended out of 130 books he read on spirituality. He said this was the most important, and it's fun. It's a fun one on Audible because this guy's kind of like a George Carlin
Uh-huh.
figure. He's like
Uh-huh.
really funny and really wise. Um, and so, if you have that awareness, if you're like really have that deep communion with your soul, then you'll realize that $1 billion valuation is purely a act of ego. There's no other explanation for it. And it could be an act of ego that really is the doom of your company. And so, you need to look, it's like anything else. You need to come up with a fair deal for both parties. Like the best investments are ones where both people are going to make a lot of money
Yes.
under different scenarios. And that's what I'm always trying to do. Like I'm very proud of the fact with Bizarre Voice that people made, anywhere from 70 to 110 times their money. I mean, that's kind of an
Yeah.
incredible thing. People put 100,000 in, made 7 million to 11 million dollars. Um, of course, it wasn't like the biggest exit of all time. I mean, it was $1 billion IPO, and as you said, it won different awards for that, which is great. But there were people that invested at the beginning of Facebook that made like 3,000 times their money. Like
Yeah.
that's one. Jason Calacanis, who recently moved to Austin, always likes to brag about Uber, where he put in $100,000, and I think that netted, $100 million or something like that. So, there are those examples. I haven't had one of those yet. We're investors in 100 and a little bit over 170 startups.
Mhm.
And we're in the seed round for what are now 12 unicorns, which is fantastic. I mean, that's like a huge home run for us,
Yeah.
um, and a home run for those entrepreneurs. But uh, I was just on a trip, as you know, in the Grand Canyon, and the organizer of that trip is a very good friend of mine, and he's been in the seed round for now what are 42 unicorns, right? So
Wow.
so it's incredible. But the main thing I am is an entrepreneur, and that's what I like to do the most. The investing stuff I do on the side is more to help other entrepreneurs and the karmic benefit of that, and also just the intellectual curiosity of lots of different levels of impact in different industries. And I've learned so much through investing in other entrepreneurs, and I'm there to help them when they need a shoulder to either cry on, or they've got a big opportunity, or board member not working out, or whatever it
Right.
is. Because I almost never serve on the board of directors. I'm only on one for-profit board of directors today for Lincoln Brown's company, who's one of my best friends, and I'm really passionate about that company. So I stay very disciplined in making sure that I can be literally someone not in control of anything for them, so that they can just completely be transparent with me about things either melting up or melting down.
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning. That's who you are fundamentally as a person. Obviously the investing is a part of it, but it's how you invest. So people that are listening, I'm, I'm guessing I wonder, like, what are your criteria? What are the things you look for when you're going to invest in a company? What are the kind of the do's and don'ts for yourself that you see?
Can't remember which chapter of my book this one is, but the chapter about the five critical ingredients of building a big company really is the way I think as an investor when I'm investing in companies. And, number one there is I'm thinking about the business model. That is the most important factor for success, and that includes the timing of that business model. Bill Gross, the co-founder of Idea Lab, who started that with Howard Morgan, and Howard
Yeah.
Morgan was the co-founder with Josh Koppelman of First Round Capital. That they did a ton of analysis at Idea Lab, and there's a great TED talk. I would encourage people to just go search for Bill Gross TED talk, and you'll find it. But the analysis showed them that the most important factor of all was not team, was not capital, it was timing. And timing of a business model, the market it's in, is the single most important factor. Second most, of course, is the team, the dynamics of the team. I will not invest in a business that doesn't have on its founding team someone that can sell, someone that can build, and someone that can service. You got to have
Mm.
all three personas. Now, sometimes that's one person. I
Uh-huh.
didn't know Michael Dell back when he started Dell, and I'm not sure I would have been smart enough to invest in it. But he had all three of those things. Like he literally could sell,
Uh-huh.
service and build it. That's super, super rare. Sometimes that exists in just a very advanced, entrepreneurs at a very young age. He was a teenager, and had those skills. So that's super, super rare. Um, but team definitely matters. Mindset, are they really going to have the mindset to go long? At Bizarre Voice, Brent Barden, my co-founder, and I could have sold the company for $20 million in the first year. People would have been high-fiving us. It would have created the ripple effects of having over $1 billion outcome, and having over 70 companies start by former Bizarre Voice people. And the greatest compliment they give me today is the fact that they have that same strong culture in their company
Yeah.
that we had at Bizarre Voice. And Bizarre Voice, by the way, I recently spoke at their 20-year reunion or anniversary of the business. Keith Nealon, who was the CEO at the time, invited me to do that. And it was infused with tons of love. And a lot of
Uh-huh.
people came up to me and said, hey, the culture is still very much intact, which is so, so cool. But mindset on whether or not they have the gusto to go long, like I'm Jewish, as you know, and in Israel, like one of the problems in Israel for a long time is that they would always sell early. They don't do that anymore as much. Right now, they're building like multi-billion
Uh-huh.
dollar companies. Wiz just got acquired in an absolutely historic acquisition. I can't remember what that. I think it was over $20 billion acquisition, and something like 3,000 times people's money, including the early VCs. So, Israel's figured it out. Um, and then, looking at things like what is the operating system of the company, the culture, what's going to really bring out the best in the company. And, there's some other factors, but those are the main things that I'm quickly looking through all those things because I've probably seen at this point over 5,000 pitches in the last 16 years. So I can think really quickly through those things because I have developed, what VCs would call pattern recognition. And that's just because I'm like Woody Allen. I just keep showing up, right?
Yeah.
99% of success, he said, in life is just if you show up or not.
Yeah.
So
You've got a real gift, and I know sometimes it's hard to see our gifts in ourselves, but you've got a real gift of just innovation. You're always kind of thinking it ahead of where the market is or what's going on. And one of those things, and you talked about it in your visit back to Bizarre Voice at their 20-year anniversary, and people coming up to you and saying, hey, the culture is still alive. But I remember in the early days when you really were caring about cultures, things as, I mean, something as small and as simple as saying, like, people are calling it butts and seats. You said,
mhm,
we're not
mhm.
calling that. These are real human beings. We're
Yeah,
no
yeah.
longer. we're not that is not a word or words that we're going to connect.
Yep.
And
And
just
they
you
were
do it.
calling women girls,
Yep.
and they were calling programmers code monkeys,
Yeah.
and all these dehumanizing terms. I mean, I've heard like head count,
Yeah.
heads, et cetera. It's like, no, we are fully embodied people.
Yeah.
And,
Well, and,
that really matters to not use dehumanizing language. And, there's all these crazy words in business, like we need to penetrate this market and just all this kind of stuff that, you know, I realized I was using some wartime language earlier, so guilty as charged, right?
well, I
So,
mean, it's, we do that, but the thing I want to kind of highlight and shine a light on is you were really cared about the culture before culture was a thing. Today, it's like, of course, but I remember you, from certain board members and from certain people, like, oh, that culture thing. It's just we're spending too much time on that. Let's
all
just
right,
focus.
all right.
You know, and you didn't listen to that. And I
Yeah.
remember it's, one of these stories is you're growing up, your mom protected you. Like you cared deeply about coding and about learning. And everyone was
Hmm.
saying, well, why isn't hand him a football? Like, why isn't he out, on,
Yep.
and everything else like that. And so your ability to kind of see more and see before others is that gift that I'm talking about. But this thing about culture and data.world, as we said earlier, was a B Corp, a benefit corporation, and you scaled it successfully and sold it to ServiceNow, and it was a great outcome. But what did you learn? And maybe it wasn't at data.world. I think it was probably earlier in your life about balancing kind of mission and
Hmm.
growth and culture, as well as being able to raise and deploy capital,
Yeah.
and kind of being a purpose-driven founder and leader.
Yeah. Well, in Judaism, the core mantra is tikkun olam, which means to repair the world. And that is the whole driving purpose of Judaism. So I've always believed a business is a force for good. I grew up working in my parents' stores and I saw how much joy they had in working with customers. And sometimes it was really comical, right? They would have the customers that were just kind of completely, you know, crazy. There's all types of stories my dad was able to tell, but they had real joy in what they did. My dad invented the first halogen fishing light, and he was like a celebrity with fishermen, and he had real joy in his work, and my mom did too. And that doesn't mean they didn't have tough times. I saw them almost go out of business multiple times, and that was humility inducing. But it's really a choice. You coach leaders all the time, and it really is a choice on whether or not you want to lead with fear or you want to lead with love. If you lead with fear, it is truly your own suffering that's coming out with that. It's something that happened to you in your childhood that you never got over. You weren't loved enough, and so you decided to punch down at the world and make people feel small compared to you. And those leaders tend to be more about themselves and they use I a lot. You can call them out very easily because they almost never give credit to anybody else, publicly on podcast or anything else. The leaders that lead with love, it's more about we, and they really mean that. There's a lot of people that fake that. So you've got to be
Yes.
wary of that. I've seen that in my career too, but they truly embody love in everything that they do. And that doesn't mean that they're weak kneed and not able to
Yeah.
make the tough calls. It's actually an act of love to get someone out of your company that's not a good fit. That is an act of love for the collective, for the soul of the company. And if you lead with love, you're going to have a lot better life. You're not going to have a heart attack young. You're going to be very happy inside. You're the whole point of this lifetime for us all. And the whole it's encoded in the fabric of the universe. And my word for that is God is to choose to lead with love because that is the highest order value in the universe. The universe ultimately is a loving place. And the whole point of our lives in what I'll call Earth School is to manifest as much love as we can while we're here. And the people that are the most celebrated throughout history did that. I mean, think about Gandhi and Nelson Mandela and pick whoever your favorite is.
Uh,
These were people that had infinite capacities for love, for humanity. And that started, by the way, with them being able to love themselves. If you can't love yourself, then you truly can't love others. And I'm not talking about being egotistical about yourself. I'm talking about, that communion with your soul and knowing that we're all here for divine purpose and to radiate that out. So you'll just be a lot happier. I mean, you'll be in harmony with the universe or with
mhm.
spirituality or however you want to look at that. I choose to use the word God because that's my knowing, but I understand that some people feel uncomfortable with that for lots of reasons. Call it consciousness, call it the astral plane, call it the universe, call it whatever you
Yeah,
want. But
yeah,
whatever it is encoded with love. And the hero's journey, right, are always stories of love. That's, Joseph Campbell who identified that in his work. And the arc of every story that we celebrate are acts of love, from Star Wars to Star Trek to, any pick your favorite movie.
yeah,
Rocky,
yeah.
Rocky is a story of love.
Yes,
It's a story of the hero facing adversity and overcoming that. And, even though Rocky, spoiler alert if you haven't seen Rocky 1, but he loses at the end.
yeah,
Okay. I
yeah,
think that's the most brilliant Rocky movie of them all because he doesn't win.
yeah,
But you can tell that he truly is embodied in his soul and living from a place of love. And he's got that heart, right? That I'm actually getting chills like telling you about this because
yeah.
that's how much that original movie means to me.
Mhm.
And you don't always win, but Rocky knew in his heart that he was living a life of love. And that's why he was able to attract Adrian and have true love
Mhm.
because he was able to love himself and love his mission in life. And that's the story of every loving entrepreneur. And you said that this is a recent phenomenon. Um, in some ways, that's true. We talk about it more, but Gandhi's not that recent. Mandela's not that recent. If you're a Christian, I'm Jewish, but Jesus not that recent. In
Yeah,
Judaism, Moses not that recent. So
yeah,
these acts of love have been around, forever. And that's yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
yeah. No, and I'd be remiss if I didn't point out, and this, it's the whole reason I have the For You. This is the For You Leaders podcast. It is about being for you, and there's
Yes.
people that are against you, and
I mean,
there's
you are the embodiment of love, my friend. I mean, you really are. Like you truly love what you do. You truly love the leaders you work with. When I've seen you suffer, it's when you're working with a leader that you don't feel like is
yeah,
embodying that, and that's where you usually get out, right? And
yeah,
because you can't. It's very hard to transform someone that's broken inside. And anybody that I've ever seen in my life who's really tried to hurt me, especially for trying to focus on culture, they have their own brokenness that they're
yes,
trying. And by the way, I don't harbor any ill will towards them.
no,
Like I
yeah, I
really
know you
don't.
don't.
I know that at their core, they're a divine soul like the rest of us, but they just have too much programming. There's so much programming we get in our lives that corrupt our ability to manifest love. And to manifest love, you have to deprogram. I mean, you put two babies together, and it doesn't matter if they're one race or another, one religion or another. I mean, the babies don't even know what religion is. That they're totally loving towards each other. And
Yes,
then there's these programming of
no,
how to think about the other sex, the other religion, the other race, or whatever it is. And that's just that's that's the root of all the problems in the world.
yeah, and I want to be respectful of time, and I know we could keep going on, and I do have a couple more questions, but I want to really double down on what you're talking about here. Is like I said, even this word, you choose the word God, I do as well, but other, and I think it was in the absence of love where people got hurt
Hmm.
by someone maybe
Right.
saying or using God as a, you know way, or consciousness, or whatever the words are, but it was
Yeah.
probably in the absence of that love where they drew away from that. But to your point, underneath that, if you look at it, this is something that has been around for a long time. When I was saying it was fairly new, is I was talking about this culture, and we're kind of wrapping that. I but the issue of love has been around since the beginning of time. And so
Since the beginning of
and it's
time.
a choice, it's a choice, and I think
Yeah.
it's a choice that you're giving words to now. You've always led that way, but I think you're coming into a season of life where you're actually giving word and momentum to it, and understanding how it connects to everything else.
Yeah. By the way, I was hosting this dinner at our home, and it was like a really vibrant, one table conversation dinner with 14 of the most amazing AI experts. And we're talking about whether AI could be conscious or not, like conscious like we are.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm very doubtful but that's a whole different subject. I'm going to talk a lot about that on my own new podcast, which is
Yeah,
about,
which I want to make
yeah.
sure we have time at the end here,
Uh,
because I really did want to spend time having
But
people
just
on
real
talking
quickly,
this.
let me just make this one point real fast.
Yeah.
One of the people around the table said, "Well, I've seen what great of a job humanity's done," and it literally hurt my heart. Like I felt my heart hurt when they said that.
Uh-huh.
Because yes, humanity has lots of issues. Like I'm Jewish, there was the Holocaust. I mean,
Yeah.
there are all types of things to complain about with humanity. But in a world of 8.2 billion people, there are acts of amazing love and kindness every single day. You wouldn't know that from reading the news or being on social media primarily, because in a world of 8.2 billion people, there's a murder happening every day, et cetera, that's written about. But humanity at its core is mostly loving. And one of my friends, Byron Reese, talks about this. And so I'm stealing a line from him. But if you go back in the genetic records, it was really clear that there were only 800 humans at one point on Earth. Like that we had gotten down to that small of a population. And if our inherent nature was just to kill each other, well, we would have be gone. That would have been it.
Yeah.
Humanity experiment over. But those 800 humans pulled together, and they're all of our genetic descendants from this day. They had such tough conditions that literally got down to where we're almost extinct. And so humanity at its core actually is loving. It's all the programming that we need to overcome. And that includes programming in business, all those dehumanizing words we were talking about earlier.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, very true. Well, I want to do a lightning round, but at the very end, I want you to talk a little bit about what you're doing next, how
Sure.
people can find you, because I really do want them to hear and learn. You're going to be starting your own podcast,
Yeah.
the book that we talked about at the beginning. There are so many ways in which you are so much of a river and not a reservoir. And what I mean by that is a reservoir kind of, gathering and keeping and holding, versus a river just kind of pouring out into the world. There's so much. And I know that you're open to people being able to reach out, or at least find and learn more from you. So let's do this lightning round super
All
quick.
right. Sure.
I'll ask a
Yep.
question quick. You answer it quick. Best advice you'd ever received about raising capital?
Uh, to really, really care about the chemistry.
Okay. Yeah. That reference check that we're talking about. Fundraising mistake you'll never make again.
To not to look the other way when there's some hair on the reference.
Most underrated skill a CEO needs when the company starts to scale fast.
Um, the most underrated. I mean, the ability to lead with love. Like most
Yep.
people don't think about that.
Yep. That's what I was hoping that was going to be your answer. I thought it would be, but yeah, I agree with you. It's yeah, love and humility.
Yeah. I mean, if you only look at the numbers of a business, then it just distills the whole thing down into a flat spreadsheet, and there's some
Yeah.
texture and a soul and everything else in
Yeah.
a business.
Yeah. 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 A time when you walked away from money, and why was it the right call?
Oh gosh, there's been many, many times where I've walked away from money. It's all been around, for me, the reference check, or um, it just felt so transactional and, you know, just so unloving.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I knew for them it was only about the financial return and nothing else mattered. And there was no deep human connection between us. And there's, some people raise money from quote unquote dumb money investors, which is a horrible term to use.
Yeah.
And then they'll end up with the biggest pain in the ass they've ever had because that person does not understand the business at all and will ask them constant questions about everything and not be able to provide much value.
Yeah.
So I'm fine with taking people that don't know anything about the industry, like as angel investors, as long as they are inherently, really loving people at their core.
Okay, that's really good. Biggest misconception about what it's like to lead a company after a major raise.
That it's all going to be roses from there. I mean, it's you're going to face a lot of hard knocks, and even if you're going up into the right and you just had a historic capital raise and everybody's high-fiving about the valuation, the next day it's back to work.
Yeah. Um, a book or kind of a framework or mentor that's had the big or biggest impact on how you build companies and think about growing businesses.
My favorite human being in capitalism is Warren Buffett for two reasons. One, he uses language that is very accessible to everybody, even though he's got the best investing track record of anyone.
Uh,
So he truly has humility. He lives in the same house that he had at the beginning of Berkshire Hathaway. I've seen it. I've met him. I went on Ollie the trolley in Omaha to be part of picking him up and spending an afternoon with him. Um, and the one Warren Buffett story I'll tell you, which tells you everything you actually need to know about family and business, is when the financial crisis was going on, 2008, 2009, the CEO of Goldman Sachs called him in a panic and needed a bailout loan, or Goldman Sachs was going to go out of business. And he was eating ice cream with one of his grandchildren at Dairy Queen, or maybe great grandchildren. And he said, "Hey, I'm eating ice cream right now. I'll call you back. I know why you're calling." He called him back after 30 minutes and he did the deal in 10 minutes. And he gave them $10 billion dollars, and people thought he was an idiot. And he was excoriated on CNBC. The old man's kind of lost it, et cetera, et cetera. Tells you everything you need to know. A, he values family, right? He
yes.
values that
Yep.
time with family.
Yep.
B, he starts every day by reading for 4 hours. And so he already knew all the numbers about Goldman
Uh,
Sachs. He didn't need to do any analysis. He already knew all about the CEO and the missteps, et cetera. And C, like, he was not listening to the cheap seats. He ultimately had the conviction of like, this is a good deal. It's like one of the all-time best returns for Berkshire Hathaway in terms of a $10 billion loan.
yeah, I love that story. Thank you for sharing that. And um, this is not an empty compliment. I think you're that same way. I know you're an excellent husband who cares deeply and a father that pours into your kids. And if you didn't do any of these other things that we've went through and all the other accomplishments you've had, you've changed generations by the way that you lead there at
Thank you.
home. And that's a big deal. Um, quickly, we'll move here. I know you need to get going. This is sound self-serving. It's not you. I've worked with you in the coaching capacity, but it's been more of a friendship. Um, I don't want you to talk about me as much as how do you think about the role of coaching for founders and CEOs? Some people think they need them, some people think they don't. There's some good ones, there's some bad ones. How do you think about it?
Well, I think it's good to be skeptical of that world because there, in my opinion, very few coaches who actually know what it's like to be in your seat. You're in that rare exception where you have scaled a company to over $1 billion of revenue, not just valuation. And so that makes you a very rare type because most people that have done that don't go into coaching. Most people that go into coaching have actually not had the experience of ever scaling anything like that. Um, but there are legendary coaches out there. Bill Campbell, I never met him, but he's one of the all-time legendary coaches in Silicon Valley. The people that did work with him call him like the greatest of all time, the GOAT. Um, so, ultimately, you should have a coach. because if you're in the professional sports world of business, which something you told me early on, to not have a coach, you would never think about going into a pro football game without a coach. And you need that person that both experientially has the ability to help you and is not on your board of directors or anything else, and can truly be like that to others. I mean, I'm that for the companies that we invest in. I'm not a hired coach, but and they don't contact me all that often. But when they do contact me, it's either because something really is melting down or is melting up. And in both cases, I can help them all the way through IPO. And so I
Yeah.
enjoy doing that. And it's my way to give back. And as you know, the coacher, the coach learns as much as the coachee.
Yes. Absolutely.
Goes
Yeah.
both
Yeah. No,
ways.
it's a huge gift. Huge is definitely a two-way street for sure. So, uh, talk a little bit about how people can find out, about your podcast that's coming up, you
Sure.
know, just, yeah. So give some feedback there because I know people are going to want to connect with you and learn more because
Yeah.
it's been a very soulful conversation.
So this is going to start out sounding fearful, but let me just explain really quickly. So I'm operating from a place right now at age 53, and with the technology acceleration I see underway, I've been very good about predicting technology trends since I was very young. That is one skill I will say yes, I have that skill. I predicted most of the major technology trends. And I'm operating from a place today that in the next 10 to 15 years, with the acceleration of ChatGPT now being less than 3 years old, and humanity prioritizing the development of AI, quantum computing, robotics at a level and pace that is truly unprecedented. I mean, when President Trump announced the Stargate project on February 21st at 500 billion, right beside Mayoshi-san and Sam Altman and Larry Ellison, that's more money inflation adjusted than humanity spent on the Manhattan Project to develop the atomic bomb versus the Nazis. If they'd gotten it first, it'd be a very different world. And how much JFK and others invest in the space race versus the Russians to make sure we don't cede controlled space to the Russians. It's like it's a massive difference, inflation adjusted. I mean, a massive difference. And then Trump did that deal in the UAE, which is like $4.5 trillion dollars.
Yeah.
The day before Trump made that announcement, DeepSeek announced R1. So I think
Hmm.
Trump made the announcement on February 21st. I think DeepSeek R1 was announced on February 20th, which is the Chinese open source model that by far and away bested GPT-4, which that was March of 2023 when everybody was saying, shut it down, like moratorium call. Um,
Uh,
I was not one of those, but a lot of people, 37,000 people signed that
yeah.
moratorium call. So here we are in this age where I'm operating from a place where we're talking about either an age of abundance for all, and I mean for all, I mean for countries like Chad, the poorest countries in the world, that we're going to manifest in this lifetime if humanity allows love to conquer fear, or it's the destruction of everything. And I know that that sounds daunting, and it is. And I'm 95% certain that humanity is going to make it, just like we did with nuclear weapons, just like we did with smallpox,
Mhm.
just like we did when we were down to 800 humans. Um, but it's up to all of us. And so I'm writing a book called Love Conquers Fear, and the subtitle is Humanity, AI, and Age of Abundance for All, that is separated in three parts. Part one is on fear and abundance. Part two is on applying that to the biggest problems in the world, like climate change, geopolitics, et cetera. Part three is on how to embody leaders so that they operate from a place of love. Because my biggest fear is that humanity's locked into this zero sum, fear based scarcity mindset Like, if we get AGI before China, we're going to subjugate them. If China gets AGI before us, they're going to subjugate us. And this is technology, which you and I have used the word God. I would say this is God's final exam for humanity on whether or not we have the ability, with an unprecedented rise in technology of unprecedented power, that we don't destroy ourselves and that we overcome our fear and truly treat each other as equals to manifest that world of abundance. And if we do that, then the universe in many ways is ours, meaning that we will propagate the rest of the universe with love. And it's like a Star Trek type of future. But we have to get there first, and it's going to be really rocky over the next 10 years. So I'm looking at what is my highest utility as a human being to help love to conquer fear. So the name of my podcast is called Love Conquers Fear. That'll launch in mid-September. The name of the book I just said, and that'll launch afterwards, either late this year or early next year. And then I'm going to start, a company or two next year around that thesis, and I'm investing as well of that thesis. So my holding company for all of this is called Love Conquers Fear,
Mhm.
and it's going to be exciting. I mean, I'm not operating from a place of being paralyzed. I'm
Yeah,
operating from a
not at
place of
all.
my soul being very embodied and very active, and I feel younger, more vibrant than I've ever felt in my entire life. And so, I'm operating from a place of urgency, but not from paranoia, just from a place of like, hey, we gotta manifest this future together. Um, and so that's what I'm up to. And it's the most important mission I've had yet. You know how important the number seven is to me. And
Yes.
the next ventures that I launch, and maybe it's just this holding company, is the seventh, is my seventh venture, right? I mean, data.world was my sixth, Bizarre Voice was my fifth, Core Metrics was my fourth, and the first three were small bootstrap, but all profitable and successful in their own right. So this is the time where you, me, and all of us have to lay it all on the field. And of course, I'm going to have you on my podcast as well when we get together. But we really have to lay it all on the field. And a lot of people are laying on the field, by the way. Dimas
Yeah.
Hassibis, Mustafa Suleiman, Dr. Fifi Lee, Mira Murati, Eric Schmidt. There's a lot of people laying it all on the field because they realize like what's about to happen. And most people don't. Most people in the world haven't even used ChatGPT a single time. And they probably don't even know what Claude is by Anthropic, which is the second
Yeah.
contender.
Yeah.
So it is a time where we've all got to lay it all in the field, and I'm confident that we'll get to that age of abundance for all. But it's going to be rocky. There's going to be a lot of stuff that happens along the way that I'm writing about in the book.
Well, listening to you talk, it's it got emotional. One is just, people that are listening. I've gotten the privilege to be next to this man, this leader for 15 years, and have these kind of conversations. But Brett is a person that has poured into me. He's one of those people that Mitchell said lead edge wouldn't be where they are. I wouldn't be where I am without you believing in me, seeing things in myself that I didn't see, and taking that love that you're talking about. And we talk about leading with fear, putting fear in others, but there's also another version of leading with fear, fear, that we carry about our inadequacies, our shortcomings. And you're somebody that has consistently shown up in so many people's lives that way. And I can speak to mine specifically. So thank you for being on this podcast.
Thank you. And right back at you. Honestly, I'm a product of those that have believed in me, starting with my parents and you, Julie Maples, Mitchell, you all believed in me for a long time. And we're on this journey together. We're
Yeah.
meant to help each other. Um, we're all on different version of that hero's journey, but the hero's not doing it alone. The
That's
hero's doing it
right.
with people, helping them out. And there is no example of anybody in human history, including the famous, spiritual leaders. Moses was not the first to tell everybody to walk
Yeah.
into the part in the Red Sea. That was Actually, another much less known person that most people have never heard of, which that was the whole portion of the Torah that Rachel was bat mitzvahed on. You were there for.
Yes. Yeah, I
So
got to read at it. Yes.
yeah. So I mean, this is the way it works, is that we're all here to help each other, to manifest love in each other. And certainly I appreciate what you're saying and really take that to heart. But right back at you and all the people that believe in me.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Brett.
Thank you for tuning in to the For You Leaders podcast with Kirk Dando. If this episode helped you think more clearly or act more decisively, that's good. But the journey doesn't stop there. Subscribe for more content on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, or go to Kirk's website at kirkdando.com to inquire about coaching opportunities. Now think of a friend, family member, or business leader in your life. How could you help normalize their journey today? Share this podcast with them. We hope that this sparks meaningful conversations in your life and that it enables you to become the leader that you aspire to be.